Hi, I'm Leo, I'm a writer and illustrator, and today I'm going to completely dismantle one of my illustrations and build it back up layer by layer to reveal how it's made and all the little details that go into creating something like this. There's 679 layers, I just checked. I've got the info panel up. See, just by there. So this is the illustration I'm going to break down, and I spent the best part of a decade working in TV, amongst other things, but it was mostly work for TV shows. And because of that, things could change all the time. You could get to the end of a project and you might get a call saying, we need to change this, and this by the end of the day. And because of that, I've adapted how I create things into this completely non-destructive workflow where pretty much everything to the extreme is editable and can be changed at any time. And what's useful about that is because illustrations take quite a while, I often come up with different ways to tell stories. So I might be halfway through a picture book dummy and then come up with an idea that could really elevate the story. But if I just created everything as flat objects, that would be a nightmare to change. But because I work like this, it's quite easy to just go back and chop and change things and move things about, and yeah, it's helpful. Anyway, onto this. So what I'm doing is, for this piece, it started off with quite a tight sketch. So you can see all the background is getting blocked in, and on the side, these are all my layers, and it's a bit crazy. So every one of these folders has a whole bunch of layers in. Yeah, so you can see with the windows you have just the block itself, and then you have the shading in a separate section. Yeah, anyway, I'm just rambling now. Let's keep going through. So this here, what I'm doing is changing the values. So I wanted to create more depth. So that was just going through and just updating that. Add a couple little patches. Something you might notice as well is there's all these small details. So you can see over here, there's character names that are scribbled in like a height chart on the wall. And I try to include as many little details as possible, within reason, of course, but I think it's fun. But yeah, so here's a perfect example. So now we've got our characters in the scene. Perfect example. I could pick this character up and move him around. If I needed to have him a bit closer, I could do that. Or if you wanted to get weird and add some text behind, beautiful colour. So you could just add things wherever you want it to be, and it just makes it really easy to work with. And then this is where I might lose a few people, because it gets really dark, but you got to trust the process. And because I've done this enough times now that I can get through the muddy middle. I feel like there's always that part with illustrations where you're kind of halfway through, maybe a bit over halfway through, and you start to think, have I forgotten everything I've ever learnt? And is this actually going to turn out good? But yeah, I like to think that it does. I also should note here, I like to do highlight passes. So I try to separate colour passes and highlight passes, shadow passes and things. So here, you can see we've taken it from something that seems really dark and gloomy, and just with simple little bit of colour correction, completely transforms it. And next we have a colour pass to add a bunch of glows. This is kind of a global colour pass rather than individual characters. I quite like adding painterly lines around the edges. It depends on the piece, obviously, but I think it's fun. A little bit more, and then finally we have a final colour correction, and this colour correction is more to match it to the other illustrations. So the actual values and stuff of this colour here works, but then I needed to adjust it slightly so that it fits in line with the rest of the illustrations and the scene and that. So here's something interesting. I mean, it's not interesting to most people, but it's interesting to me and it might be interesting to illustrators. There's gamut correction. So if you can see here, the colours were getting a bit too warm. So if you convert that into CMYK, so my usual workflow is work in RGB, flatten, convert to CMYK, and then colour correct again to make sure that it matches and patch everything up. But yeah, the colour was a little bit too warm, so if you converted that to RGB, the print would look weird. So there's gamut correction here to fix that. And then one final little thing. I always work with a swatch palette. So these are generally the colours that are used throughout. So yeah, that's just a very quick breakdown of how I created that illustration. And there's some interesting storytelling elements going on, just subtle world building with fragile tape on the cardboard box and things, and then you have little cobwebs to create scenery, and this under here tells the entire story of the book through just scribbles on the underneath of the table. I thought it was cool. There's also subtle nods to different things throughout. But yeah, that's the end of the video. How do you end a YouTube video? I don't know.